Hi, this is Krista Walsh.
Hey, this is Daniel Arthur Smith.
Hey, this is Terry R. Hill.
Hey, it's Josh Hayes, and you're listening to
30-minute author interviews
with my friend Preston Lay.
Woohoo! Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of 30-minute author interviews. There is a giveaway with this week's episode, but before I tell you about it, let me tell you about our two sponsors. First up is the Galactic Satori Chronicles by Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks. The Galactic Satori Chronicles. A thirst for revenge sends one man on a deadly journey through the galaxy in this adrenaline-pumping new series. Asher is a young man whose world is turned upside down when he discovers that his fiance's death has been directly caused by an imminent alien invasion. Projecting their consciousness into unsuspecting men and women, these aliens are learning exactly how to use humanity's own selfishness and greed as weapons against them. Asher bands together with a group of friends, and these four MIT co-eds are more than meets the eye and go to battle with those who are intent on destroying our planet. Out of the Gray by Patricia Gilliam. Aliens, politics, and murder. Only the first one is new. When an Earth-based terrorist group targets Hanaria's ambassador, two teenagers become entrapped in the conflict. Alex Vernon is the son of an Earth Independence Party representative and doesn't want to follow his father's path of political manipulation and corruption. Rika Miller is the adopted daughter of an engineer and nurse who later discovers she's not human but Hanarian. Alex must decide between his family loyalties and saving the life of an alien he's been taught to fear and hate, while Rika searches for the truth of what happened to her birth parents. The Galactic Satori Chronicles by Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks and Out of the Gray by Patricia Gilliam can both be found on Amazon. Or just head on over to legendarium.com, check out the show notes for this episode, and in the show notes we will include a link where you can check out both of these books on Amazon and learn more about them and buy them if you would like to. And now for the giveaway that I was telling you about. This week we're joined by Erin Rhew and Deek Rhew, and they would like to give one person the chance to win a signed copy of a book from each of them. Erin is going to give you a signed copy of The Prophecy, the first book in her Fulfillment series, and Deek is going to be giving you a signed copy of Birth of an American Gigolo. All you need to do is head on over to legendarium.com, find the show notes, and let us know what was your favorite part of the episode. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. This week is first for the Legendarium and 30-Minute Author Interviews. We have a married couple, and they each write different books. So we have with us this week Erin Rhew and Deek Rhew. Thank you for taking time out of y'all's day and coming on 30-Minute Author Interviews.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we like to start each episode here with a segment that we call Two Truths and a Lie, where you tell me two truths and a lie about yourself, and I try to guess which one is correct. I just started a win streak last week, so I'm hoping y'all don't break it, but I'm not holding my breath. So, Erin, I'll let you go ladies first. Do you have two truths and a lie about yourself that I can try to guess?
I do. Okay, so the first one is I'm terrified of both E.T. and Yoda. The second one, I've been in 10 car accidents where I was not the driver. And the last one, my favorite snack is sweet tea and hush puppies.
Okay. Hush puppies are great. I love hush puppies. I was trying to go based on some advice I was given by Peter Cauldron. He told me the ones that sound the most ridiculous are probably true. So I did that last week and it worked. But I don't know if that's going to work this week. So I thought you put up a tweet before we came on that y'all were having sweet tea this morning. So I'm going to say that one's true, so I'm going to narrow it down to the lies, either 10 accidents or being afraid of E.T. and Yoda. Man, I have no clue. You write fantasy. So, but that's not really, man, sci-fi and fantasy are plugged in. I don't know. That just seems so out there, though. For some reason, I'm going to say that's true. So I'm going to say the lie is you've been in 10 accidents where you were the passenger is the lie.
Okay, the lie is that my favorite snack is sweet tea.
Dang it.
I love Hush Puppies, but I do not like sweet tea. And I'm afraid my grandmother is going to take away my Southern card because I don't like sweet tea.
That is so funny.
She puts it at the table every time. Like I'm going to magically like it somehow. But I don't.
That's funny. I used to work... there's a place in Charleston called the Charleston Tea Plantation, and they grow and make their own tea there. And I don't drink tea, and I got a job there. I did some of their accounting, and so I had to deal with the vendors that bought from us, and I would take some phone orders also from people that just wanted to order, and they'd be like, "So, what's your favorite tea that y'all sell?" And I would just pull up the numbers and see what was selling the fastest. And I'm like, oh, the strawberry tea is fabulous. And or not strawberry, peach. The peach tea is our top seller, and it's so good. And well, give me some of that. I'm like, perfect. So, yeah.
Well, we work as a team, so I drink her sweet tea.
Yeah.
I do love it.
Nice.
I can keep my Southern card because I have someone who'll drink my sweet tea.
But you got to watch it because it's got a lot of calories in it, and it'll put on some weight. So.
That's fun. So you are afraid of E.T. and Yoda?
I am absolutely terrified of them, yes. There's a Snapchat filter with E.T. on it, and I about fell off my chair when it came up.
Did you just get, scarred as a child? Did someone scare you dressed up?
Yeah, I think I was shown those movies when I was really little, and then I would have dreams about them, and then one Halloween, I was dressed as a cowgirl, and I opened the door, and who is at my door but E.T. and Yoda together? And I ran and I hid under the bed, and I did not come out for the rest of Halloween because I was convinced they had found me and they were ready to take me away.
Oh, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, I don't eat Reese's Pieces either because it draws out ETs.
Well, you go to a lot of cons, though, don't you?
Thankfully, I've not seen an ET.
Okay.
And you don't see Yoda very often
not
either.
very often. Not any real ones. Like we've seen a guy dressed as Groot who looked really real, but we haven't seen anybody do that with E.T. or Yoda.
Huh.
Thank goodness.
Right. Somebody's going to hear this now and know that you're going to a con, and they're going to dress up as E.T. or Yoda now and come find you.
Probably. My coworkers used to tape pictures of him to my chair, so when I turned around to sit in it, there he was. And
that's funny. Wow. Okay. Well, Deek, we'll come to you now.
Okay.
What are 2 truths and a lie about yourself?
All right. So the first one is, my father and I have driven real race cars on the Portland International Speedway. Number 2 is I was born in the backseat of a 1961 Barracuda in Great Falls, Montana, because we got stuck in a snowdrift along the highway to the hospital. And number 3 is I wrote my first book. It had a word count of 180,000 words in it, which is nearly 3 times the legal limit.
Okay, so I get to cheat a little bit on this one.
Okay.
So I think I listened to a podcast that you were on.
Oh, no.
And so I remember hearing your word count was way higher than you thought, and that was one of the lessons you learned about writing. So, but was it 180,000? So I'm going to say that one's true.
Okay.
That would be cool, driving race cars. I've never done that. Or being born in a bear. See, I'm going to go with the advice I was given a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to say the lie is driving race cars on the Portland track.
All right. Well, that would be wrong. So you got
Dang it.
0 for 2. My father did actually drive. My father and I did drive race cars on the Portland National Speedway. The Barracuda story is actually it's based a little bit on reality. because we did live in Great Falls, Montana, and we did have a 1961 Barracuda. And actually, there was this big hill with a that was actually it was this mountain range that we lived in, and there was this big slope that ran along the river. And my mom always tells the story about how we were up in our house, and we heard this crash, and she heard it, over and over, crash, crash, and she went out and they looked over the edge, and in this dip, these cars were trying to go up the hill, but it was all covered in ice. And they would just slide back down and they would collide with whatever car was at the bottom, and they would try again, and they did it over and over again. And so from that, I kind of born this little story. And you're not the first one to actually believe it, so don't put that.
I said, you put too many details. He's going to know. And he goes, no, they say the more fantastical it sounds, the more they'll pick it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Deke. So when you wrote your first story, that was the 122 rules, correct?
That is correct, yes.
When you found out, or how did you find out about that 180,000 word count? Because I didn't know that there was rules for, I guess because it was because you went with a small press, and so there's rules for how big they want debut novels. How did you find all that out?
Well, so I started querying, actually, and I went on some sites, and I was like, I'm working on my query letter and because you get 300 words to describe this book. And mine was, of course, 180,000 words. So, I had 300 words in which to describe this huge War and Peace sized novel. And I'm trying to narrow it down. And somebody asked me how big it was, and they're like, no, you need to do a little research. And so I started Googling it, and it's pretty standard. Like, for debut novelists, word count for, an adult novel like what I write is about 80,000 words. And for YA, it'd be like 60,000 and so on and so forth. You can get away with a little bit more if you're doing sci-fi, but, it's pretty common. But it's not until you do the research and you understand what the rules are that you'll, you just need to do your research, basically. And I didn't. I missed that rule.
And it's not just small presses. These are agents and big publishers. This is pretty standard across the board that you need to have a lower word count for a debut novel.
Yeah, they'll look at they'll just read your query letter, and they'll be like, oh, too big. And they'll just reject it right away. They won't even bother to read it.
Wow. So why did you decide to go small press for your debut novel instead of just putting it out yourself?
Well, I tried to get an agent, worked really hard, but I never got it picked up. And so I debated about doing self-pub and going with small press. And then I did PitMad. And basically you just put this little tweet up there. And if somebody likes it, then it's a publisher. And so that's how I got picked up. And Panda Moon liked one of my tweets, and they asked for the first 3 chapters, and then they asked for the full.
How many pages is 180,000? Isn't that close to some of like Brandon Sanderson's books?
Yeah, it's like 400 pages or something. Because my current book it's a sci-fi, and I'm at 90,000 words right now, and I'm running about 200 pages.
Okay.
Well, for reference, The Prophecy is about 65,000 words, and it's 307 pages.
Yeah. Well, that's printed. So I'm
printed.
talking about Word, Microsoft Word pages. But yeah, printed, it would probably be
it
like
would be George R. Martin's Dance of Dragons.
Right. It's like a Stephen King book at that point. It's so thick. I can't get away with that because I'm not Stephen King.
So your original idea for 122 rules was having a doorstop for a book. That's hilarious.
Right, or an ottoman, because it's
that's right, something like that. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen a thriller that long. So yeah, that's kind of interesting.
There's a reason, because there's standards that they have in place for that
right.
stuff.
Yeah, so I broke it up into 2. I just finished the first round of my personal edits on the follow-up novel. So, but I'm waiting it probably won't come out for a couple of years. I think I'm going to self-pub that one.
Oh, okay. So you're not going to stick with the small pub for the second book?
Oh, no, we're not going to stick with it. We're having some creative differences. So
okay.
Yeah.
I guess while we're talking about this, do you want to give the readers kind of your non-spoiler blurb on what your 122 Rules series is about?
Sure. It's a book about a federal assassin who is on assignment, and he's about to pull the trigger on his latest mark, and he suddenly has this conscience that appears and is, making him question whether or not he is doing the right thing. And anybody who has that job and suddenly has a conscience, it's going to cause them some problems. So he has to decide whether or not he's going to carry out the task and kill her, or if he's going to try and save her.
Now, where did you get your original idea for the story?
So, interestingly, I was driving to work. I used to drive an hour one way, and it's like in the morning. And I had this vision of a scene that came to me, and it was like so vivid that I actually pulled off to the side of the road. And this is back in the day when we had Blackberries. And I typed out this scene in the book on my Blackberry. Like, I described it like exactly. And so after that, then, I transcribed it. Somehow later on, I lost that chapter. I don't know how it happened. So I rewrote it on my computer. And then, one chapter just started flowing after the other. And it just kept coming and coming and coming. And eventually I came up with a War and Peace size novel.
Eventually I had a doorstop.
Right? Exactly.
That's too funny. So did you plan out the book at all, or did you, be a pantser for that whole book?
No, I'm absolutely a pantser. I don't plot it out. Like, I'll have kind of a vague recollection of a notion of where it's going to go. But I don't have any idea where things are going to happen. As long as I know where the next chapter starts, that's all I care about. And I'll just go. And sometimes, like, when I'm writing, I don't know what's going to happen until I type it. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I'm having, enjoying the story as if I was reading it.
That's interesting. So do you know where the series is going at all?
So, interestingly, I have a little bit more idea where this series is going because, of course, since my book was so incredibly huge, I had to break it up. And so the first concept for the book, I got it out there. I broke it up like I was going to. Well, what happened is that when I broke it apart, the second half of that book actually is becoming the third half. So another book had to follow up the first one because the bad guy lived, and he's a really, really bad guy. And he goes to this little town called Alabaster Cove, and he just raises havoc there. And that's where the second book, 122 Rules of Redemption, is at. And so then the third book will actually start with that scene that I envisioned way back in Portland, and I typed out on my Blackberry.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you figure out, since you wrote such a huge, first draft or story, how did you know where the best place to break it up was? Did you actually go by the word count, or did you say it feels good stopping it right here?
No, I did. I wanted to go by the word count. Like, if I could have just gone, 90,000 words, chunk, cut it off right there, and you're all good to go. But it didn't make logical sense to break the book up there. And one of the characters that died in the original draft didn't die in the new version of the book. So when I rewrote it, I just edited it and edited it and edited it, and finally came up with, move stuff around and, just cleaned it up until I had what I felt like was the basics of the story down. You're creating this vision. Basically, I think Stephen King calls it transcribing. So you have this image in your head, and I'm trying to take the image from my head, and I'm trying to put it into yours. And getting a clear vision of what that image is not always easy. And it took me a long, long time. It took me 7 years to get my first book out.
Wow.
Yeah.
So for 7 years, was it just because you had a day job, or is it did you put that much work into the novel?
Oh gosh, I wish I had all the time during the day. I could have got it a lot faster. No, I work full time, so you've got regular life on top of it. So squeezing hours in the morning and in the evening. I had a favorite coffee shop I used to go to in Portland where I would write, and everybody knew me because I was there like every morning. I would get in there like 5 in the morning and write until like 7 when I had to go to work.
Now, part of the novel is this guy has what's called 122 rules. He uses 122 rules of psychology.
Yeah.
Did you actually write out 122 rules for the character?
I did. I sat down and I made up some rules as I went along in the book. But I'm like, if I'm really going to get into this guy's head, if I'm really going to know what makes him tick and to know what rules to apply in what situations and how to control a person, then I need to figure out what all the rules are. And I actually have a complete set of the rules.
Now, when you started writing your rules, did you know it was going to be 122 of them, or did you just go until you couldn't come up with any more?
No, I had 122 in my head for whatever reason. It came out of the ether.
So how much research and studying in psychology did you have to do in order to write this novel?
Well, I took a couple of psychology classes in Portland, or in college, if that counts. Most of it just comes from just straight up observation of people. One of Erin's favorite author, a playwright, is Shakespeare, and he is known as someone who's like one of the most observant of people. He's a people observer, and so he just watches people and understands what makes them tick, and that's just what I did. I just thought about social situations, and I watched people, who manipulated other people and how they controlled them, and I just got inspiration from that.
So you are the modern day Shakespeare.
No, I wish. No. I was not saying I'm like on level. Please do not misinterpret that. Inspiration from the great bard.
Can you give us an example of just maybe a few of the rules that you came up with for how he operates?
Yeah. So one of my favorite ones is frustrated people do not think clearly. This is rule number 45. Rule number 46. Angry people do not think rationally. Rule number 47. Furious people do not think at all.
I can see that. I know when I'm frustrated, I don't think very clear. Oh, that's funny. And so then your other story that you have out is called Birth of an American Gigolo.
Yes.
And this also takes place in the same world of 122 rules. So where did this idea for Birth of an American Gigolo come from?
So I was in the middle of writing my Ottoman, and so in the middle of it, this woman named Lindsay came up. She lives in the town of Alabaster Cove, and she decided that it was time for her story to be told. And it just came up right in the middle of this dumb story. And as I'm writing it, I'm like, this doesn't fit. This doesn't fit at all. This is not this. Even I, as someone who's never published a book, knows that I'm wandering way off the topic. So I was like, but that's okay. I'll just let her story come out. And it did. It came out. And then so I cut it out of the book and I put it in its own document. And it sat on a shelf for, I don't know, like 2 or 3 years. And we finished up the final round of edits on 122 rules when I was going through the publishing company. And after we got that done, after we finished it up, then Erin goes, we should get Birth out there and we should just go ahead and self-publish. And so Erin and I sat down and we edited it like crazy. And then I sent it to the same content editor that did 122 rules. And, we did a couple rounds with her. And so Birth actually came out before 122 did. Now, the interesting thing about Birth is that there's a crossover character that's in both stories. And there's actually a crossover conversation that happens. So this woman named Angel, who is in both books, she is comes and rescues Monica. She's like her best friend who's like knee deep in the 122 world. And so Monica calls Angel, goes, "Hey, I'm in trouble. Can you come help me?" Now in 122, you hear Monica's side of the conversation on the phone, and you don't hear Angel's side. Well, in Angel's side, she is right in the middle of this just outrageous situation where she was just proposed to by this guy, and he's talking about taking her back to his island and getting a dowry and like all of these crazy things, trading chickens for her, maidenhood and stuff. And you hear her on the phone and she's just like, "Yes, I'm getting out of this situation. Sure, I'll come help you." And so, she runs off. And so you get to hear both sides of the conversation.
Birth of an American Gigolo is it's listed as a satire. It's kind of what I've read of it so far. There are some parts that they're definitely going to make you laugh. But it also mixes in some romance in the story because of, I don't want to give away too much of the story, what the lady is doing in the novel. How did you still keep it light and funny, yet keep it from going to like just straight up erotica?
I don't write erotica, and you don't need to describe people's kibbles and bits to get the idea of what's going on. And so, that's not what it's about. The story is about Lindsay's path to getting out of this awful situation that he got herself into. It's about her moxie and, her unusual solution to her problem. Most people who would find themselves in that situation, there'd be fighting and there would be divorce and there'd be all these different things. But she is kind of stuck, and she doesn't want to break up her family because she loves her family. But she's also not willing to sit back and allow herself to be taken advantage of. So she comes up with the most unusual solution to this problem. And and that's what the story is really about. And it just happens to be kind of a risque topic at the same time.
My favorite part that made me laugh out loud the most was Dr. Croc. That when I got to that part and you read, "I have this book for you should read by Dr. Croc," I was like, that's too funny right there. Did you plan that part, or did that just come out?
It just came out. Like, I'm a total pantser. Like, this was not. I didn't even intend to tell her story at the time that it came out. Lindsay was just like, "No, if you've read the book, then you know what she's like. And if she wants something, she's going to make it happen, including me."
Right. Did you have a hard time? So you started writing 122 rules first, but you put out Birth first. Did you have a hard time going from writing more of a thriller to writing this satire / romance story?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty, since it did arise right out of the middle of 122, like it kind of flows. It's kind of got a little bit like the language is about the same and the feel is about the same, and you just gotta like Lindsay. You get in her world, and plus it had Angel in it, who was the crossover character, so it wasn't really that hard to switch from one to the other.
Okay.
He has more trouble, or he said he had to look at Birth last night because he's been working on a sci-fi, and that's very different.
Yeah.
So he had to read Birth again to get in Lindsay's head again because he's been in this sci-fi world, and that's a huge leap.
The people that Jeff Braxton, who's in my new book, it's The Extractor. He's vastly different, and the writing style, plus it's first person, the writing style and the language is very different than this. So it took me a few minutes to get back into Lindsay's head, but when I got back there, I was like, yeah, I like it here.
That's funny. That's funny. So what's the premise going to be, the little non-spoiler book blurb on what Extractor is going to be about?
So Extractor is set in the future, and it is a virtual reality story, and it's this gentleman named Jeff Braxton, and he creates this virtual reality company. It's a gaming company, but they do like TV shows and all this stuff. And he teams up with this other company who promises to deliver not just being able to deliver sight and sound, but also to be able to deliver memories and feelings, like whole body sensations. Unfortunately, he discovers too late that they are killing people and stealing their memories and feelings to deliver to his virtual gaming company.
Very interesting. When do you have a timeline you're looking for getting that novel out?
So I'm working through my first round of self-edits right now, and I'm hoping to have that done by October. And then the follow-up book, The Injector, I'm going to write right on the heels of it. And I'll get the rough done. I'm hoping to have them both done and shopping them around by next summer.
Oh, okay. Very cool. It sounds interesting, so I definitely can't wait to read that. Where did you get an idea to write a sci-fi when you've written thriller?
So Erin and I sit and we just talk, and all the time we go down to all these random bunny trails, and we I don't even know what we were talking about, but I'll be like, hey, what do you think about XYZ? And so we'll just kind of ponder it, and so I'll write up a little synopsis about whatever it is that we came up with. Just the most random things will inspire inspiration or give me inspiration for story ideas. And we did this one. I don't remember when we did it, but I know that as I was finishing up Redemption, the opening chapter to the Extractor was just banging on my forehead. It's like, I want to tell my story now. And so as soon as I got my first round of edits done on Redemption, then I went ahead and I just started plowing through this next book. And it came out pretty quick, like really quick.
I think we were at the tattoo parlor, and our tattoo artist shares a room with her partner, who is also a tattoo artist.
Yeah.
And her partner said that he loved virtual reality so much he wished he could live there all the time.
That's right.
And I think we started talking about, what if virtual reality, because you've seen Surrogates maybe by Bruce Willis, that Bruce Willis is in, and
Mm-hmm.
what it could come to. And I think Deek started thinking about that, and he was like, well, what if it went like this whole other way?
Uh-huh. Yeah. In this book, there's no glasses, no headsets or anything. People have what I call a sensory tap, and it taps right into, and it sends the signals right to your visual cortex and to the hearing center of your brain and all these other things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. Did you have to do much research for any of that?
I have had to do tons of research for this book. Yeah, and I've learned all kinds of random things about the brain and how it works and all that stuff. And some of the stuff I've just completely made up. So people will be like, no, that's just not going to work. Or they're going to be like, we have to suspend disbelief because it sounds too outrageous. But hopefully not. Like, that kind of drives me a little crazy when you see something on TV or you read a story or whatever, and you're just like, okay, yeah, I'll just suspend disbelief. We're watching Supernaturals right now, and so you really have to suspend disbelief. But the thing that got me was the technical stuff. Like, the guy's car gets completely T-boned, and they fix it in like a week. And for whatever reason, those little details kind of bother me. So I tried to iron it out so people are not like tripping over those sorts of things, because it feels like it takes you out of the. I feel like it takes you out of the story when that sort of stuff happens.
That's how I feel about Fast and Furious movies now. I haven't seen the 8th one yet. I have all the other ones just because to complete my collection. But the one where was it The Rock? No, Jason Statham. I think it was number 7. Jason Statham and Vin Diesel, plow into each other head on at like 70 plus miles an hour, and then they get out like nothing happened and just crack their neck, and then they rip off part of the car and start it. I'm just like, this is Transformer stuff now. This is not Fast and Furious.
it takes you out of the story when that sort of thing happens.
Yeah, and then saw the preview for the 8th one, and they're racing on ice and start getting chased by a submarine. I'm like, come on.
Oh my gosh.
I was joking around with, it was at the Roanoke Author Invasion. I was with Terry Maggart and Stacey Rourke, and we were talking about Fast and Furious. And I said, I said by the 10th one, they're going to be in space and they're going to be racing on the planets or, something. And then sure enough, like 6 months later, there was some kind of convention and someone asked the guy about, you going to take this into space? And he's like, there's really no limits to where we can go with Fast and Furious. I was like, dang it, I knew it. It's just ridiculous now. The first ones were amazing, but yeah. Do you have an excerpt from one of your books, The 122 Rules or Birth of an American Gigolo, that you'd like to read for the listeners?
Sure, I would love to. All right. I was going to read from Birth.
Okay.
It's funny that you pointed out that part about Dr. Croc, because it is in the first chapter.
Nice.
All right. Lindsay reached under... so to set this up, she has brought him his lunch. She brought her husband's... this is Lindsay, and she's brought her husband Stuart his lunch. He's on some weird, crazy diet where he wants kimchi and natto and all this, and she just cannot stand any of this mess. And his diet and his tastes and all these long hours and all this stuff all started when he hired his assistant, Cindy. So we're in this scene... and she's gone to his office, and she just found something under his desk that has confirmed her suspicions that he is having an affair. And so that's where we're picking up here.
Okay.
Lindsay reached further under Stuart's desk and retrieved the small foil pouch. Her mind raced. New secretary, new couch, long hours, now a used wrapper. All these add up to a lying, cheating jerk. Leaving the napkins and the mess on the floor, she stood, spied a lead opener on the desk, and started to reach for it. She paused just before her fingers wrapped around the shiny but potentially lethal metal stake that would both free her from this humiliation and also land her behind bars for the rest of her life. She sucked in a lungful of air as she pulled back her hand. He's not worth it. You will find another way to get back at him, but going to prison isn't it. She tucked the little foil pouch into her purse and walked out of his office. Her mind floated like a balloon tethered to the rest of her body by the thinnest of ribbons, as though her conscience and her body had become two separate things. Stuart saw her coming and pressed the button for the elevator. As the doors slid open, he tried to grab her elbow and guide her in. Lindsay yanked her arm free. I'm not in the mood for lunch. You'd best go by yourself. Stuart held up his hands. What's the matter, Linz? Are you still upset by what Cindy said? You really need to get over that. He moved as though to join her, but she shoved him back. I said I'm not in the mood to eat. Lindsay shot daggers out of her eyes until he shook his head and stepped back, and she pressed the down button. He offered a limp wave as she closed the door. Hey, I thought you were getting the dishes. On the ride to Stuart's office, Lindsay had stuffed the foul concoction her husband called a lunch into the back of the car. But after several such deliveries, the smell had seeped into the upholstery, split open the plastic and rubber trim, and rusted the whole of the vehicle. The odor haunted the car like a poltergeist. No one wanted to ride with her anymore. Not her friends, not her kids. Even the cat objected more than usual on the way to the vet. The menacing, unrelenting olfactory phantom assaulted her anew as soon as she climbed into the driver's seat, feeding the flames of her fury with roiling, boiling kerosene. A scream emanated from her tortured soul, shaking the windows and rattling the dash as her primal fury tore from her throat. She jammed the keys into the ignition, slammed the transmission into drive, and peeled out of the parking lot. Squealing around the corner and flying down the street, she bypassed the road to their house and drove 80 miles to Yachats instead. There, she traded their conservative Subaru wagon for the largest hulking piece of Detroit chrome and steel the U.S. industry had to offer. She walked into the dealership, seen the beast, asked if it came in leather, and said she'd take it. After that, Lindsay had driven the hulking monstrosity from the lot to the electronics superstore, where she purchased the largest Chinese-made flat-screen TV they had in stock. This year's Christmas card would picture her and the kids dressed in camo, posed in front of their new SUV with a dead deer strapped to the hood, each holding a rifle and a turkey leg. Merry frickin' Christmas from the Newmans. Breaking about every law road created since 1945, Lindsay flew back to town, She didn't slow as she crossed the bridge and directed the beast to Steward's office. Cindy's little Vespa scooter sat parked in the sidewalk in front of the building. When Lindsay's large vehicle bumped up onto the curb with nary a complaint, she floored the accelerator and aimed down the walkway. With a satisfying crunch, the SUV hit the Vespa, smashing it under large all-terrain tires. Lindsay slammed on the brakes, dropped the hulking beast in reverse, and drove over the efficient little mode of transportation again. She smiled as one little scooter wheel rolled pathetically out into the street, pirouetted a couple times, and then came to rest on its side. She put the SUV into drive and drove the beast home.
I love that scene. It's such a good part. Well, that is the excerpt from Birth of an American Gigolo. And you can also get 122 Rules on Amazon or wherever else you can get books, I believe, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now to you, Erin, now that we've talked about Deek for so long.
I always talk about Deek, so.
Now when the segment comes up, let's talk about Erin for a while.
Yeah, let's go to Erin now. Your series is the Fulfillment series. Can you give my listeners the non-spoiler blurb on what your series is about?
Sure. It's about a girl who is proclaimed the fulfillment of an ancient peace prophecy. There are these warring nations, and there's always been this prophecy that one day someone will come and bring peace, and she is labeled the person that is set to do that. But she is kidnapped by religious zealots who don't want this peace to happen. And all sorts of things ensue from there.
Now, where did your idea for this series come from?
I don't really know. I think it's, I call it a mix of Arthurian legend. I love King Arthur series, and then Game of Thrones. So it's kind of in that world set in the period of knights and kings. And one day I just happened to be watching First Night, which has like the best kiss scene in a movie ever. And while I'm sitting there, the words Vanguard and Ethereal popped into my mind. And then Layla and Nash and Samson, those names. And I just kind of mulled that over the next couple of days, and I wrote up kind of a little synopsis of what I thought it would be about. And then I sent it to my friends. And I was like, would you read this book? Because we were all part of a book club, and they were like, yeah, totally. If you write it, we would read it. And so they kind of became what I call my dream team. They kept me on task because I have a little bit of ADD. So, one of them requested a chapter a day so that I was always writing and always sending it to her. And then I had one that made sure that people didn't walk through walls or anything like that, that all the story was consistent. And then another one that helped me if I got stuck creatively, and then my proofreader. So we kind of banded together this group effort to make this book.
Wow. How did you create the world that you've created in the Fulfillment series?
I don't really know. Like, I'm a pantser too. And, I know that the Harry Potter world and the Game of Thrones, like if you were to look at a board of that, it's just like everywhere, all plotted out. But I didn't really do that. The worlds just came on their own. I mean, the Vanguards have a very specific way of living. They're more military, they're strong. And the Ethereals, it's kind of like the word sounds, they're all about the mind and the heart. And these two people, they just don't function well together, these two people groups. And they each have powers that allow them to potentially overtake the other one. But because the powers are in a weird way equal, they've kind of just constantly been at war with each other.
Now, you said that you sent your friends a little, synopsis and asked them, would you read this? Have you stuck pretty true to the synopsis you sent them, or has the story kind of gone in a different direction?
I did. I actually just altered a little bit of that synopsis, and that's what I sent, for my query letters and stuff.
Wow.
I did stick pretty close to it. And I am a pantser, but for this one, I did kind of write out a rough outline, definitely not plotting anything or making a world or, making the maps or anything like that. But I just wanted to be sure that if I wrote a trilogy, that the second book would not be a filler book. Because at the time that I was writing this, I was reading a lot of trilogies, and that second book was usually just painful to get through. Mm-hmm. I said to my friends, because they'd heard me rail at book club about the filler second book, that I would rather just write 2 than write a trilogy that had a second book that didn't have a purpose except as a bridge. And so I did kind of do a little outline so that I made sure that I had enough story for 3 books.
So is this series, is it through then? Is it just a trilogy and so you're done with it? Or are you going to keep writing in the world?
Well, I keep saying that I'm done with it, but I keep getting people that want prequels because the parents of some of the characters also appear in this book. They're the king and the queen and whatever, and they have a backstory, and they're like, we want to see their story come to life. And then, there is an ending, but it kind of does leave room open for maybe something to come later. And people keep asking for that, but I don't know. I don't know. I want to explore different stories, but I also want to keep my fans of this story happy. So I'm kind of mulling a lot of things over.
She did a little bit like George Lucas did, where she wrote the middle 3 stories and kind of left it open for a prequel and a sequel. So we're all kind of hoping that she figures out what the first stories are and the next following stories.
There we go. Just don't put Yoda or E.T. in it.
Right? Exactly. That would be really odd in this world to have Yoda.
Go to someone's castle door and they'll run and hide under their bed for the rest of the day.
That's right. So when you were deciding to make it a trilogy and you were starting to outline, how did you overcome just book 2 feeling like a filler?
Well, I wanted there to be the resolution of some things from the first book, but then an opening of new things that needed a resolution. And also I wanted adventure and character development and the moving forward of the story in the second one so that it felt like the first one or the third one. So I tried to balance all those things instead of just having characters walk through the desert for the whole book in order to get to the location that would then be the third book,
Right. Why did you decide to go with YA fantasy instead of just making it regular old adult fantasy?
I have had mostly all my life, even when I was a teenager, read adult books. And then I joined this book club, and my friend Danielle is like me. Like, we both kind of have ADD and our brains are just all the time. And she was like, you have to start reading YA books. And I'm like, what? What is that? And she was like, it's like teenagers. And I'm like, really? And she was like, you need to, it's awesome. And because it's fast paced and the stories are good and it'll keep you interested. That's not a slow burn like an adult book. And so I started reading them, and I just did not stop. Like, I just read, and I even went down and read a little middle grade with Percy Jackson, and just all over the place reading all these YA books. And I'm like, this is amazing. I love the pace. I love the teen angst and all that's in there. And so then when this idea came to me, it was in a YA world because that's what I was immersed in.
Okay. And this was put out by Bookfish Books. I haven't heard of that. So is that just a small press?
Yes, small press. It originally, the Prophecy came out with Muse It Up, which is another small press. But after my time there was up, I moved it over to Bookfish, where I was able to have some more creative control.
Now you have a degree in what is your degree? I'm forgetting now. I heard it in an interview, but what's your degree in?
I have a degree in communication, and I am 2 credits short of a double major in English and communication because I refused to take Chaucer and Old English. I believe I need. Okay, let me just for the listeners out there, Shakespeare, not even Middle English. Okay, modern English, and they wanted me to take Old English. No, thank you.
So how has going towards a degree in writing, has that helped you in writing your fulfillment series?
Yes and no. It's like a weird thing because grammar in academia is different than grammar in fiction writing. They love adverbs and things like that in academia. Make it as colorful with the adverbs as possible, but that's a no-no in fiction. So I have all the grammar skills, where the commas go, how to make your sentences flow and all that. And I had that down, but I had to learn the fiction side of it, how to do it for fiction. And I had to let go of some of my more anal retentive academia requirements.
What was the hardest academia requirement that you had to let go of when writing your book?
Well, I think I don't like to end on a preposition because my professors, I went to Meredith College, and they are known for their English department. Like, they are called the grammar Nazis of the college system. So all these rules were like pounded into my head. And so if I end on a preposition or if I start with and or but, I just get a little like freak out inside of myself. And I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. You can do that. And my writing tends to be, I think, a little more formal because of that. Deek calls me Lady Shakespeare. Because I love, of course, Shakespeare, but also because it's a little more formal. So it works really well in the Prophecy series because it's kings and queens and things like that. But now that I'm on to this young adult sci-fi, I have to let some of that language go so that I don't sound stiff.
Where did you get your inspiration for this new YA sci-fi that you're working on?
Well, it's kind of like the way that Deek came up with his virtual reality. We just talk about things all the time, and this sci-fi story is kind of like what would happen if everything in our lives was YouTube. Because there's this whole YouTube craze where people play with stuffed animals and record it, and people watch it. Or, they play a video game and they record themselves playing it and people watch it. And so, we were talking about what if every moment of your life you recorded for like a YouTube kind of program. And it was all about who can get the most likes and the most favorites. And it was this dog eat dog kind of fake world where you're trying to, fake book your life, but all the time.
So since y'all are both writing YA sci-fi, are y'all going to be writing kind of in the same world, or are they going to be two totally separate worlds?
His is adult. He writes adult, and I'm the YA. So, no, these worlds are completely, vastly different.
They're almost, we've talked about it, they're almost opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have an excerpt from the Fulfillment series that you could read for my listeners?
I do. So, to set the scene, Layla and her brother Samson have gone to the Day of Dawning festival, which is a festival that they hold every year in celebration of the first ones, which is their religious belief system. And every year, the group called the Ecclesiastics, which is the reigning religious group in this world, comes to a small town to have the ceremony and to look for the fulfillment. And so Layla's family knows that she potentially could be a fulfillment candidate because she fits the profile, but and so they didn't want her to go today because the Ecclesiastics would be there. So that's where we're picking up.
Okay.
Okay. Everything must be taken down. A rotund man with beady black eyes surveyed the town, disdain in his expression. While he did not appear distinguishable from the other black and purple-clad men, he spoke with authority. The first ones in their great prophecy must be honored properly. He sniffed, his actions indicating the very existence of Medlin and its occupants offended him. Layla wondered what this man considered a proper honoring of the first ones. The first ones. They'd been dead for centuries, and as far as Layla could tell, they hadn't done much in life except start a never-ending war. She knew nothing more about them except that she was to thank them for good things, curse them for bad things, and celebrate them on this day. "That's Elder Warwick, the head of the ecclesiastics," whispered Samson, glancing back at Grant. Layla noticed the look that passed between them. Grant nodded. "Get her out of here, brother." Samson tried to steer Layla away, but she held her position to get a closer look at the man whom her family so feared. She knew they had good reason to worry. Her black hair and purple eyes marked her as a fulfillment candidate, one with the potential to bring about the long-awaited peace. But she couldn't quite bring herself to believe Elder Warwick would notice her on a crowded street, especially with her eye drops and hood. Could he really be responsible for dragging candidates from their homes, forcing them to undergo strenuous, sometimes gruesome testing for the sake of the prophecy? To Layla, he looked like nothing more than a short, fat, unhappy man. The very notion that he could strike such fear into the hearts of her people seemed almost laughable. Almost. As his gaze swept over the crowd, she glimpsed a sinister undertone that made her shiver. Waving his pudgy arms at the awaiting townspeople, Warwick commanded, "Take it down." Suddenly, his body stilled and his tiny eyes grew wide. They connected with Layla's, narrowing with calculation. The elder turned to his nearest black-clad companion. "Do you feel that?" Layla heard Warwick ask. The other man looked skeptical. "Feel what, elder?" Warwick leaned in as the two whispered, stealing furtive glances in her direction. When the elder's companion pointed at Layla, Samson grabbed her arm. She heard his breathing change from rhythmic to jagged as he pulled her away from the men. "We have to go now!" His urgency spurred her into action. Grant moved to block them from the elder's view. "Get her away from here, Samson." The elder looked up to see everyone staring as if frozen. He repeated his demand. "I said take everything down." The townspeople, joined by the elder's minions, scampered and began removing the decorations, anxious to properly celebrate the first ones. Their flurry of activity concealed Layla as Samson and Grant escorted her away. She scanned the streets, horrified, as the people of Medlin stripped the town center bare. In no time, everything appeared as it always had, devoid of any celebratory adornments. She looked up at the sky with its gray clouds lingering overhead. A bad omen. On the hill, a safe distance away, Layla watched a group of ecclesiastics erect a monstrous stage where the donkey races should have occurred. She heard the braying of angry animals harnessed and corralled on the orders of the elder in order to avoid interfering with the true day of dawning celebration. Her ire rose. Who did they think they were, coming in and changing everything? An icy phantom finger traced a frigid line down her spine. After hearing warning after warning from the Mantars her whole life, she knew exactly what the ecclesiastics could do, what they had done to others in the past. Maybe Samson and Grant had been right. Maybe she should have never come, especially today. Layla turned her back on the town, resolved to go home to safety. "Layla!" Samson's alarmed tone sliced through her, and she swung around toward him. To her horror, two vanguard soldiers forced Samson to the ground. She knew just how much strength he possessed, yet he couldn't free himself. Her hands balled up into fists, shaking with their desire to unleash the full force of their fury. "Run!" Samson screamed before the soldier's fist smashed down into his face.
Very nice. And just like Deek, your novels can be found on Amazon and wherever else you like to order your books from.
Yes.
Yeah, if you just Google us, we're like the first 5 pages of the Google hits.
There we go. Who was your favorite character when you were writing your fulfillment series? Who was the one character you just enjoyed writing the most?
Samson.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
Yes, he is my. I'm in love with Percy Jackson. Like, Deek knows that if Percy crawls out of the books, then I may have to marry him too. And so Samson is my homage to Rick Riordan and Percy Jackson. He has the snark and all the things that I love about Percy.
Oh, that's awesome. I did not know that.
Yes.
So the one thing that drew me to your books when I met y'all at the Roanoke Author Invasion, what drew me to the table was actually your covers for the series. Who did the covers, and where did the idea for your covers come from?
Anita Carroll at Race Point did the covers, and she does all the covers for Bookfish's books. But she also does freelance. So if any, self-publishers are looking for a great cover artist, to me, she is one of the best in the business. And we love her so much that we convinced Jay's publisher to let her make the cover for his 122 Rules book as well. And she did Birth of an American Gigolo. And in terms of for this cover, I knew I didn't want people on it because I had done a poll, of YA readers, and they don't like faces. They want to create their own images of the characters. So I knew I didn't want that, and I knew I wanted a symbol. And my friend Danielle, that's part of the Dream Team, she loved these stories so much that she researched all these different things and created symbols for all 5 of the people groups that are in my story. And so Anita came up with this beautiful blue background and the swirly ball thing. And then this picture at the bottom is one she took. She's a photographer as well as a cover artist. And she had never used this photo on any of her covers before. She'd been waiting for the right one. And she said this was the right one to put this beloved picture of hers on. And so I looked at it, and it just looked too sci-fi with just the ball. It looked like something that the Terminator was going to come out of. And so I asked Danielle, could I send the symbols that she had made to Anita and see if Anita could work it in. And Danielle said yes, and she signed away the rights and everything. And Anita put the Vanguard symbol that's on the prophecy in the middle of that ball, and it was like, ah!
Yeah.
Like, everything came together then. And so the symbols that Danielle created are on the cover of each of the books. And so there's the Vanguard on the first one, the ecclesiastic symbol on the second one, and the ethereal symbol on the last one.
So that pond or lake scene with the castles, that's an actual photo that she used?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's 3 photos though together that she put, right?
No, the lake is the photo, and then she added the castles.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's either like Sweden or Norway or something like that she's from, and this lake is there in her hometown. Mm-hmm. And this is a photo that has meant a lot to her, like her whole life. And she wanted to put it on a book, but it had to be the right one. And when we talked about, I wanted a symbol at the top and kind of the castles and the lake at the bottom, she was like, this is the book to put that photo on.
Man, she did a good job. You can't even tell that those castles weren't there. It actually looks like they're there.
She is amazing. Like, she told me one time that she sometimes can spend up to 6 or 7 hours just blending so that everything looks like it's meant to all be together.
Wow, that's amazing.
We tag on Twitter, we hashtag Anita is amazing. And there's a reason for it.
Because she's the best. Like, yeah. I'm always impressed with everything she does.
Yeah, and I had no idea she did Deek's, and I like Deek's covers that he's done. I think they're both great. So yeah, wow, she's definitely very well versed in art. So
she is. She really is.
Yeah, and she reads the stories first before she does the cover for them, so she really understands the story and the context of it, and she can pick out elements that are important to it. And I think it helps her with her vision of what the cover should look like. Because sometimes we just approach her and we're like, we have no idea what this thing's supposed to look like. And she'll read it and she'll be like, I got some ideas, and she'll run them by you and work with you really good. So yeah, that's part of the reason why her covers are just so amazing.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Well, one thing I wanted to make sure I let you talk about, Erin, is you put out as of the day we're recording this, a few days ago, you put out a little blog about self-editing, and I thought it was kind of, I thought your self-editing process was interesting and made a lot of sense when I was reading it. Do you want to talk about that post and your self-editing process that you go through with your novels?
Sure. So I'm a freelance editor. I also now, ironically, work for Bookfish. I edit for them and everything. And I read submissions and all these things. And you can always tell when people haven't put in the effort to do the editing. Maybe they don't know that they're supposed to. Maybe they don't know how. I'm not really sure, but you can always tell. And so when Deek and I write, we don't ever want to submit to an agent or a publisher or anybody and have them be like, oh, they didn't spend the time on this. So for the first process, for the rough draft, I try to shut this editor that lives in my head off. It's hard to do. She wants to nitpick me all the time, and I'm like, shush, shush. So I just write. The creative part just comes out. I don't worry about whether or not I have good sentence structures or whether I end on a preposition or any of those things. I just write. And then once that's done, I let it sit for a little while, a week or two. Then I come back, and that's when I start the process of nitpicking. And sometimes I do it differently. Sometimes I'll read through the whole thing and make notes to myself like I would do if I were editing for someone else. Or sometimes I just go in there and start changing everything on all the sentence structures and all that. And I do that process at least twice, sometimes 3 times. And then I'll send it to my beta readers and critique partners, Deek, my dream team, and then some of my author friends that I've met over the years. And they'll send me their notes back. And then I incorporate those in. And then I do another round where I look at it and make sure everything's okay. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to send it out. But no, do it one more time for those final little misspelled words or periods out, double periods because you fixed something somewhere or whatever. Go through and clean it up so that when an agent or publisher or even an editor that you've hired looks at it, they know that you've put the work into it and that you care about your work.
I'll put a link to the blog post over in the show notes at legendarium.com. Y'all put out some great little blog posts, so I highly recommend people follow y'all and the blog that y'all do. There's definitely some good stuff that goes on there.
I was just going to say, for people that are looking to know how to self-edit, there's also a post called Common Writing Mistakes on my blog. The common writing mistakes that we see in almost every submission that we get. And it's like a list of things you can go ahead and eliminate yourself before you send it in.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely have a link to all that over at legendarium.com in the show notes for this episode if y'all want to check that out. Here at the Legendarium, we're kind of in 30-minute author interviews. We're known for a certain question, and Erin, we'll come to you first for this question. And is a penguin walks through the door right now wearing a sombrero. What does he say, and why is he here?
He says, "Hey, baby," because it's Deek, and we're about to go into a selfie booth. And what you don't see is that I'm dressed like a flamingo with a rainbow-colored boa.
There we go. That's a good
selfie booths. Oh my gosh, we love them.
Yeah. And then Deek, same question to you, Deek. A penguin walks through the door right now wearing a sombrero. What does he say, and why is he here?
Yo quiero Taco Bell. I said, and then I take that penguin and I post a million YouTube videos and memes about him because A, he's adorable in a sombrero, and B, he's a friggin' talking penguin.
There we go. Market him out and make money off of it.
Right?
Right? You do back to my sci-fi about YouTubing everything, right?
Right? It does.
Yeah. There we go. That's funny. Deek, we'll come to you first for this question. The last question I like to ask before we close out is, do you have any advice, whether it be for writing or for life, that you would like to share with the listeners?
In at the very beginning of my 122, I've got for the tenacious, never give up. And Erin and I have the word tenacious tattooed on our wrists because we just keep working at something. And I like to say that I'll just keep pounding on something until the universe cries uncle and just gives me what I want. And, you can get knocked down and you can get beaten and people can tell you can't do it, but you just keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. And you're unstoppable if you can't, if you don't let yourself be.
I think that's some good advice. And how about you, Erin? Do you have any advice, whether it be for writing or life, that you'd like to share with listeners?
I'll go with the nerdy writing because I'm a grammar nerd. Edit, edit, edit. And when you think you're done, edit again.
There we go. I think I hadn't thought about that until I read your post. I was like, that makes sense once I read it. So I think that is some good advice. Well, where can our listeners go if they want to learn about y'all and the books that y'all write?
I am everywhere under Erin Rhew Books. So that's my Twitter, that's my Facebook, that's my website, all that. And if you Google Erin Rhew, I think I have the first 5 pages of Google, so you'll find me.
Yeah, same with me. I'm Deek Rhew Books and Amazon and Twitter and Facebook and the whole mess. And yeah, just Google us and you'll find us.
Well, we'll throw links to all that over in the show notes at legendarium.com. Thank you all for coming on and spending some time with us here at 30 Minute Author Interviews. We appreciate it.
It was our pleasure.
It was very fun. Thank you, Preston.
Thank you. That is all the time that we have for this week's episode of 30 Minute Author Interviews. Thank you so much for tuning in, and make sure you tune in next Wednesday and every Wednesday for another great author interview. And don't forget to head on over to legendarium.com and find the show notes for this episode. In the show notes, you're going to find the giveaway where one person's going to have the chance to win a signed copy of The Prophecy by Erin Rhew, and also a copy of Birth of an American Gigolo from Deek Rhew. And while you're at the show notes, check out our sponsors, The Galactic Satori Chronicles by Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks, and also Out of the Grave by Patricia Gilliam. Let them know that you heard about them right here on 30 Minute Author Interviews. And don't miss another episode of the podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, and wherever you listen to podcasts. I would also like to thank a few of our Patreon supporters. I would like to thank Third Scribe, Maggie Stewart Grant, and Nick Breaker. They're supporting 30-minute author interviews through Patreon. They are also receiving the Patreon-only podcast 10 Questions With. Visit patreon.com/legendarium and find out how you can support 30-minute author interviews for as little as $1 a month. Until next time, stay legendary.